Welcome back to the R&R Mama Show. I'm your host, Andrea Fallon, midwife, child health nurse, NDC practitioner, holistic sleep coach, and mum of two. I'm so excited to be back for another season of the R&R Mama Show. I've been on a little bit of a break with school holidays, and it kind of actually worked out not well, but the timing worked out because we were actually really sick with the flu. So I would have needed to take a break anyway. And now I've just come home from school drop off and daycare drop off, and my dog's decided, oh, I've got you all to myself. I want to play. So he's trying to get me to play with him. Anyway, I'm really excited about today's episode. Because it's been a bit of a surprise, to be honest. I was thinking, oh, what could we start off with? What could we talk about? And I thought, oh, night weaning. I haven't spoken about that before. And then all the questions started pouring in. It's been a really popular topic. And I think because, well, from my own experience as a mum, there wasn't really much information around about how to night wean. I still don't think there is. I mean, if you're reading blogs, you might find a few things. If you ring up the Australian Breastfeeding Association, I'm sure you'll get some advice, but really just generally, it's not like we ever had any pamphlets in the child health clinics about how to do it. So I think it is a bit of a topic that mums wonder about, especially if you are breastfeeding longer than what others seem to be. And, this is a group where I feel like in this group, Natural Mama Club, we maybe have more mums who are breastfeeding later, as opposed to, the mainstream where we know the breastfeeding rates drop off quite quickly. And so I also just wanted to say today is about weaning from the breast and not about stopping bottles. That's kind of a different topic for a different day. So today is about night weaning from the breast. So the first thing I wanted to cover and be really clear about is that I think we just really need to normalize feeding to sleep. So I've spoken about this quite a bit before. Feeding to sleep is not a bad habit. It is the biological norm. We know that breast milk in particular is higher in a compound called CCK at nighttime. And CCK is the precursor to melatonin. So we need CCK to help make melatonin. And melatonin is that sleep hormone that helps us to fall asleep and stay asleep at nighttime. It's part of the circadian clock. So we know from the studies that breast milk at night is actually different in the way that it's like the components of it. And it's designed to help baby sleep. And aside from the actual CCK and those sleepy compounds, when babies do feed, they get a nice big dose of oxytocin, which is the love hormone that can also make them feel nice and sleepy. And that makes mums feel nice and sleepy too, those cuddles and that sort of warm snuggliness, and just helps you go back to sleep. So feeding to sleep and then resettling in the night with the breast is very common, very normal, despite what the sleep trainers will tell you. Which will be that, you need to break the association with the breast, that it's a bad habit. All of these things, we know actually that sleep is under the control of biological sleep regulators. So I already spoke about the circadian clock, that melatonin circadian clock. The other one is sleep pressure. So that's what builds over the course of the day, makes us feel nice and tired by bedtime, and helps us to fall back to sleep nice and quickly if we do wake up in the night. Everyone does wake up in the night. So those two sleep regulators are really what control how well we sleep, and they're the driving forces behind sleep, because sleep is not under our conscious control. It's not like I can sit here and go, I'm going to fall asleep now. My body has to be in the, in the correct state to be able to fall asleep and stay asleep. Maybe if the conditions were right, as in like today in Perth, it is dark, gloomy, cold, and if I crawled into bed right now and I was all snuggly and warm and those conditions were right, maybe I could fall back to sleep, but I probably wouldn't stay asleep very long. So so those are really the drivers behind sleep, not the settling method, not whether we breastfeed to sleep, rock to sleep, try and get our baby to self-settle to sleep. Those are not the driving factors behind sleep. So one of the common, and I wrote a post about this the other day, one of the common pieces of advice that at least I used to hear, look, it's been a while since I worked in the mainstream child health system, but when I was working there regularly, one of the things I used to hear, and I think that maybe some of the sleep schools are still saying this, is that when you get to about 9 months of age, your little one should be taking a fairly decent amount of solids. And, like the 3 meals and the snacks, and you shouldn't need to feed overnight anymore. They shouldn't need it anymore, or at least, maybe once or something. And that you should really work towards cutting down the night feeds. And if you don't, then you're going to, you've only got yourself to blame for sleep issues, basically. So I really don't know where this number came from. I mean, I guess it's more like just like someone thinking that sounds good. Do you know what I mean? Like, it sounds good. You think, okay, yeah, sure. If I want my baby on 3 meals a day and snacks, like, they shouldn't need it overnight. Like, that's fine. Yes, that makes sense. But that's not based on the evidence. So let's just put that out there, that this is not a piece of advice that has come from some piece of research or best practice or anything like that. I literally think someone has just kind of said, this sounds good, so we're just going to run with this. So nutrition, I think, and they're coming at it from a nutritional point of view, but let's just tackle this. There's a few things I want to say about this. And look, it might not be that you've heard by 9 months, maybe you heard a different number, but I want to tackle this because even going into toddlerhood, we know that from a nutritional point of view, breast milk provides so much nutrition still. It has so much nutritional benefit to little ones. So I don't have it on me, unfortunately. I did have it on my phone as a little, I screen grabbed it. There is research that tells us a breakdown for toddlers, how much breast milk meets their nutritional needs. So we know that it does. It's actually huge. Like, I'll see if I can quickly find it. It's like 30% of like certain vitamin needs are met just through breast milk alone if you're still breastfeeding, and that's a toddler. So you can imagine that if you've got an infant who's feeding even more potentially and, has slightly different requirements or isn't taking as much food, that breast milk is still providing so much nutritional value for them. And that's why the feeding advice is either formula or breast milk until 12 months of age, because they do still need that nutritional value. So I think it's too black and white. It's too cut and dry to say stop feeding at night at, say, 9 months, because a little one may still need nutritionally, actually may still need that. And that's why I do discourage night weaning under 1. And not everyone does. I do take a conservative standpoint on that as a professional. I just feel that if the advice is that they still need milk until 1, and we know how breastfeeding works, as in, you can't measure feeding frequently and flexibly to make sure that you're meeting your baby's needs is kind of, best practice. So why would we say to night wean before 1? So that's I'm just talking from a nutritional point of view here, not even talking about the sleep factor. But I think it's important to know that, from a nutritional point of view, I don't even think that that's great advice. Let me just see. I really wanted to share because it was really good. It was really impressive. Now I can't find it. Of course, it wasn't that long ago that I screen grabbed it because I was sharing it with someone in another group. I've got too many screenshots. Too many. Sorry, 2 secs. Let me just see if I can find it. Otherwise, I'll come back. Oh, here we go. Okay, so breastfeeding your toddler. Now, this is based on a study that was done in 2001. Breastfeeding your toddler provides 29% of his daily energy needs 43% of protein requirements, 75% of vitamin A requirements, and 60% of vitamin C requirements. Now, let's just focus actually on that vitamin C part, because you know that vitamin C helps with iron absorption. And we know that iron starts to drop off a bit from their iron stores, drop off a bit from 6 months. And if you've got a baby who's a little bit fussy when it comes to taking iron-rich foods, you want all the vitamin C and all the things that you can get into them to help with iron absorption. So that breast milk is going to actually be helping them absorb iron, which is really important, because actually iron deficiency can lead to sleep issues. So if we're going to talk about sleep and breastfeeding, let's have a talk about, let's point that one out. Anyway, let me know in the comments, like if you've got any questions, or if this is, sounding okay so far. I just saw there are a few people on. I didn't see anyone on before, so let me know. Okay, so that's the nutritional side of this idea of like we need to night wean in the first year. The next bit is let's talk about like the emotional part of breastfeeding. So from about 6 months, we can't tell the difference between like whether a baby is feeding for sensory needs, like so they want that sensory experience, they want the cuddles, they want that feeling and that warmth, whether they're feeding for connection because, say, you've gone back to work and they just want to connect with you, or they're feeding for that nutritional side out of hunger or growth spurt. Maybe they're feeding because they're teething and it's actually feeling good for them. So we don't know why. So why is a nutritional need more important than any of those other needs? Why is a nutritional need more important than emotional connection, than a feeling of security, than connecting with the primary caregiver? That the nutritional need doesn't take preference, right? And because we can't determine between them, we can't distinguish between what the needs are, it's impossible because they can't tell us, then we risk kind of not meeting those needs if we just go, right, we're going to night wean because we've been told to do so, because otherwise it's a bad habit. So I'm not saying don't night wean before a 1 year old if you really want to. Look, because everyone has their own circumstances and their own reasons. I'm just saying that the advice to night wean before 1 to help sleep is not good advice. Okay, so what about I want to talk about returning to work as well, because I think maybe this is where some of the night weaning advice has come from with that whole 9 months things, because a lot of mums will be thinking about returning to paid work at around 8-9 months. Maybe their maternity leaves run out or whatever, and they're looking to go back at this stage. And so there is a lot of concern and anxiety in mums that I talk to when they're going back to work. And even some of the questions I got about today were around returning to work. How on earth am I going to manage nights if I'm going back to work and, I've got to function in the day and then I've got to be up in the night feeding, and oh my gosh, how am I going to manage, and all of the rest. Let's just change the way we think about this, because feeding to sleep more often than not helps everyone get back to sleep really nice and quickly. And we know from the research that it's not actually the number of times you wake up in the night that make you feel tired the next day. It's actually how long you're awake for. So if you're feeling the pressure to change what you're doing and you're thinking you've got to somehow sort this out, change the settling method. If you're sitting there rocking at night and you actually have to stay awake because you're rocking and patting and doing all of this stuff, rather than just a quick feed, roll over, go back to sleep kind of scenario, or cuddle in and go back to sleep scenario, then you're going to actually feel more tired the next day. So don't feel that pressure that you have to change anything if you're returning to work, because actually whatever gets everyone the most sleep overnight is really what's going to help when you go back to work and going to help you function. So if you're bed sharing, you're feeding to sleep overnight and you're getting more sleep that way, and there is actually research to show that mums who are doing that do get more sleep, then why change it? That's absolutely fine. So yeah, I just wanted to address that, because I think that may be where some of this idea that we have to night wean and change things up at this kind of age towards 1 year old comes from, is because that's often when people are returning to work. Okay, so I also want to have a bit of a mindset shift around the idea of night weaning as something that's going to become harder the older they get. So this is something that I find people commonly believe, that, it's like, it comes back to the bad habit thing, like the longer we do this, the harder it's going to be. Now, often I talk about sleep as, let's flip the way we look at it, and let's look at it through a child development lens. So that means let's look at it through like where our child is at developmentally and what they can do. And so if we're looking at how, the normal developmental trajectory for a toddler, they're going, say, you get to 18 months, they're starting to have a lot more comprehension. They may not have a lot of language in terms of being able to talk to you, but they do have a lot of comprehension, and that only grows. Like by 2 years old, they're saying things like little sentences, they're understanding a lot more. So the older they get, the more they understand. And so actually, the older they get, the easier it becomes to night wean. And I know that that may be hard to believe if this is your first baby and you're thinking, how am I ever going to get this kid off the breast? But it does get easier. So often I will say, if you can wait to 18 months, it will be easier for you. And after that, the older they get, the easier it tends to get. So if you get to 18 months, some of the strategies that you can use that will work well are like the books. So you may have seen it in this group before, people sharing about night weaning books. So there's some awesome books. If you go to my website, www.wholeheartedfamilyhealth.com, and you head to my, I think it's called shop or resources, I'm not sure, I can't remember. But if you go there, I've got a breastfeeding section, and there's all the actual books, the best books on night weaning are in there, and you can click through and it'll take you through to like Booktopia or whatever it is, and you can get the book. So I do have recommendations there of books that help. So you can use these books and your little one will start to understand, they're going to start to understand what you're saying to them. Whereas if you're trying to night wean a 14-month-old, they're not going to understand. So it's actually getting easier because you can use the books. You can also use a strategy called social stories, and this definitely works really well as they get closer to 2. And that's where you create a story with them as the central character. And the story is about their character and what they're going to do. And so you can create a little story around how you're going to be, not doing whatever you call it, booby or whatever. You're not going to be doing booby anymore at night time, and it's only going to be during the day. And this little character's such a big kid now, and whatever you want to do. But you insert them into the story. And because toddlers are naturally egocentric, meaning that they see the world all about themselves, they love it. They love it, and it makes it so much easier. So these are some of the strategies that you can use when you have a little one who is older, and not to feel like, oh my goodness, it's just going to get harder and harder. We've got this habit set in now and everything else. That's not the case. Cool. So that being said, the other benefit of waiting until they're older is that actually you're more likely to see an effect on sleep. So in my experience, after 18 months, when you start to think about night weaning, you're more likely to see an improvement in nighttime sleep. And again, it's not because it's a bad habit that you've created and now, you're breaking that bad habit and so you're seeing a dramatic improvement. It's actually just about where they're at developmentally, and that they're much more likely to be at a space developmentally where they can use some self-settling type tools. And because you're then giving them the opportunity to do that, and they're more likely to be developmentally ready, then you're going to be more likely to see success in terms of improved sleep. If we try too early, so say we rewind and we go back to that recommendation of like, oh, you should be cutting right down at 9 months. Say, let's just pick another figure, like 11 months. If you tried to night wean at 11 months, there is a risk. There is a risk that you're taking away your best settling tool and that you're going to just need to replace it with something else, that you're actually not going to see an improvement in sleep, that you're going to end up just rocking, every few hours instead of feeding, and then you actually get less sleep. So that's always the risk, and that's why I also generally tend to recommend, if you can get to that 18-month mark, it will be much easier. You're much more likely to see results in terms of the sleep, because developmentally they're just at that stage where they're more likely to be able to find tools to settle themselves. Whereas when you're looking at a younger baby or a younger toddler, they're less likely to have those skills yet. So let me know in the comments, is this making sense? What's your biggest takeaway so far? It is a bit of a mindset shift in terms of looking at through that child development lens, but I think it's so important because there's so much rubbish advice out there when it comes to sleep, and this night weaning, this night weaning one part of it is just, it's unfortunately it can be part of that rubbish advice. So I guess if you're really experiencing sleep struggles and you're thinking night weaning, I think first and foremost, you need to look at the root cause, which in most cases is actually disrupted sleep regulators. So it's disruption to that circadian clock, it's disruption to that sleep pressure, and those aren't quite optimized for whatever reason. So sometimes they go through a regression, which is actually mostly just a change in sleep needs, and if they don't find a new pattern that kind of fits in with those new sleep needs, that's where you can see issues with the circadian clock and that sleep pressure. And that's where you start to see these, hourly wakes, hour and a half wakes, and all of these kind of issues. So that's most often, if it's not a medical issue, obviously I'm not going to go through today potential medical issues, but if it's not a medical issue, then most often the root cause is disruption to the sleep regulators. So we need to look at those things first before we consider night weaning, because night weaning, as I said, before 18 months, it's a bit of a risk. It might not improve sleep and it might actually make things harder for you. So look, it's not going to be that way for everyone. There's always people that say, oh, I night weaned at 10 months and things got dramatically better, and that's great for them. But as I said, there is that risk. So I've got a couple of questions that were sent through, so I'm going to just answer those now. And if you've got any questions, please put them in the comments. I can't see any comments at the moment, but I will jump on my phone just to check because it might not be showing up. So someone sent through to me, should night weaning be led by me or bub? And I think that's a good question, and this is actually something that I wanted to cover but I haven't yet. So the other factor I think that needs to be considered when we're talking about night weaning is also your capacity. So it's a two-way relationship. And sometimes we get to the stage where maybe our baby's been wanting to feed hourly and we're just so touched out, and maybe there's even some aversions happening which are just horrible. Maybe you're pregnant with another one and you've got all the painful nipples and things, and it's just really hard and really awful, and you've had enough. If you feel like you don't have the capacity to continue to feed through the night, then yes, you may need to look at other ways, other settling methods. And that's okay. It's just that knowing that, those other methods, they may be more time consuming. So for example, if you switch to using bottles, then you've got to get up in the night, you've got to make the bottle, it takes time, it wakes your body up more, so you're more likely to feel tired the next day, as opposed to that quick breastfeed and roll back over, go back to sleep kind of thing. But I guess the benefit is you could have someone else make some bottles for you and maybe you can get a good stretch of sleep. So if you're at absolute wit's end and you've had enough, then maybe it is the right time for you. And it's just being mindful though that maybe your baby will still need night feeds depending on how old they are. And that may mean less sleep for you. And so then should it be led by you or Barb? So yeah, it is that two-way. So if you've had enough, that's okay. And if, oftentimes people get to the toddlerhood and they've had enough by then and they want a night wean, and that's fine. As they get older, we can set boundaries with them and know that that's okay, and they might not like it, and that's okay. You can set those boundaries with toddlers. So it really just depends on your situation, and where you're at with things and what's going on and how you feel about it all, as to, who leads the process. Does night weaning help solids intake? Again, this depends on the age and the developmental stage. Sometimes with young babies, it's really normal and common to reverse cycle. So this is where they feed a lot in the night and they don't feed much in the day. And often this just lasts for a short phase. It's a frustrating phase, but it's just a phase. And often it happens when they become very alert and interested in what's going on around them. And all of a sudden, they're not interested in having these feeds in the day. And it's just like a quick pull off, kind of situation. And so rather than reduce night feeds to try and increase day feeds, that's actually can be a little bit risky for a young baby because their weight may drop off. They may not take enough in then. You might want to instead try and increase the daytime feeds and really focus on how you can keep the baby at the breast in the day, in the hope that nights may reduce a little. But that is a bit of a normal developmental stage that they may, reverse cycle. And in that reverse cycling then, they may not want to take a lot of solids either in the day. So it's just trying with the solids, maybe just really focus on making it social, take the pressure off, don't make it a high anxiety thing, and just try and encourage those solids as well and those daytime feeds. Cool. So those were the two main questions that I had come through. I think everything else I'd already incorporated. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about is how to go about it with different scenarios. So again, depending on your capacity is really what guides the way you go about night weaning. So if your situation, if something urgent's come up, or you've got a situation where you have to night wean really quickly, or you just feel like you're at breaking point, how you go about night weaning is going to be very different from someone who just thinks like, oh, it's about time, I think I'm going to start the process, and they're wanting a gradual and gentle process. So if you're at capacity, the process that would be suggested would always be to go with like the quickest one, which may not be the most gentle in terms of like there's probably going to be some tears. But if you get another person involved to help you, that the little one knows, and that person is doing their best to respond to the baby's cues and to be there for them, that is very different from like a cry it out sleep training, and it is just doing something new in the night, and because you are really at capacity. If you want to take a gentle process, there's a million ways to go about it. But you can do it over a few months and take your time and make it nice and gentle, and, just take your time with it. So it does just depend on your situation. So let me know. I'll just check to see if there's any other questions. Otherwise, that is pretty much it. On what I was going to talk about today. No, I don't think there's any other questions. Cool. So if you want help to come up with a game plan on how you're going to manage night weaning for your situation, then this is something that I offer with my with my consults. It's called a toddler consult, but get in touch with me and we can talk about it. Like if your baby's under 1, get in touch with me and we can talk about it. But yeah, definitely, if you need help to come up with a game plan, I can certainly help you come up with a plan. I know it can feel overwhelming and like, how do I do this? How do I go about it? My child is a boob monster. Like, we can come up with a plan. And that first step is actually always to optimize those sleep regulators. So in the first place, you're reducing the number of wakes, because the less they wake, the easier it's going to be to wean them off. And then after that, it really is about how, the process of how you're going to go about it. I can see here that there is a comment. Deviating a little from weaning, if bub has a dummy at night time, would you recommend feeding back to sleep for every wake instead of using dummy in between feeds? Look, I don't think it matters. Dummies are just another tool, like another settling tool. If it's working for you, that's great. There's no rules, there's no right or wrong. Some people report that, their babies, if they spit out the dummy, that it becomes an issue, and because they're waking looking for it. So for that reason, you might want to move away from the dummy, but it's just another settling tool, like, like the other ones that are out there, the things that we do to help us. So yeah, there's no right or wrong with that. Yeah, cool. All right, I'll give you a moment to see if there's any other questions that people want to ask. But yeah, get in touch if you do want help with a plan, because I'm more than happy to talk to you about it and how, like, we can set up a time. Just hard to know whether they're waking for a feed or comfort. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was saying at the start of this episode. I was saying that you can't tell after 6 months, and it doesn't matter. It actually doesn't matter. If they're feeding for comfort, or they're and waking, looking for comfort and wanting a feed, that's still a legitimate need that they have, that need for emotional connection, that is just a different need to waking because they're hungry. But it's still a legitimate need. So there's no need to worry about, feeding to meet that need. That's still a legitimate way to meet that need. So this is where we move away from that mainstream, like sleep training advice, and that notion that is so heavily ingrained that this is somehow a bad habit, because yeah, it's not. It's just another settling method, and there's no problem with that at all. Cool. Alrighty. I think that's all the questions. So I'm happy to come back anyway if I'll be in the group if you have any questions come up. So send me a message if you want some help. More than happy to help you, and I will see you all again soon. Okay, bye.